Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a seriously fascinating new framework proposed by researcher, inventor, and author Kevin L. Brown. Now, just imagine for a second, what if a star forming in deep space, a single cell dividing in your body, and a massive AI neural network learning a new task all actually follow the exact same structural rhythm? What if the basic architecture of change itself is completely universal? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore today by looking at his book, Triune Harmonic Dynamics, the universal pattern behind energy, matter, and mind. We're going to objectively break down its core concepts and see what it's all about. This book asks a huge question. Do these wildly different processes share a recurring mathematical structure of transformation? We'll be looking closely at the claims, the mechanics, and most importantly, how the author literally invites you to put it to the test. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll cover the initial discovery, then unpack the core equation. After that, we'll blast through how it maps across 28 different domains, look at the framework's testing structure, talk about its falsifiability and a pretty wild bounty, and finally show how you can test the pattern yourself. Let's get into it. Section 1. The discovery. From markets to the cosmos. So where did this big idea actually come from? You'd probably guess a physics lab, right? Actually, no. It started in the financial markets. Brown was deep in the trenches building algorithmic trading systems. And while he was studying all this chaotic market behavior, he started noticing a recurring three-stage process. First, you'd get a setup, a new market condition forming. Then, boom, it hits a period of volatility, facing intense resistance or opposition. And finally, it hits resolution, where everything settles down into a completely new organized state. But here's the real light bulb moment. Brown realized this wasn't just about stocks and graphs. This financial pattern could actually be a proxy for a universal structure of organized change. He generalized those three stages into a much broader architecture: emergence, contrast, and integration. Think about it. Something emerges, it interacts with challenging conditions, and then it integrates into a new state. The book directly links these three distinct phases to the numbers 3, 6, and 9. Section 2. The core equation. The math of transformation. Naturally, this observation evolved into the absolute foundation of Triune Harmonic Dynamics, or THD for short. The core claim here is that this 3-6-9 progression isn't just a metaphor, it can be expressed mathematically. Okay, here is the canonical THD equation. Its goal is to model the exact amount of transformation produced by that three-phase process. I know, looking at equations can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming, but trust me, this one is built from very straightforward concepts. Let's just break it down like building blocks. T stands for the total cumulative transformation. The N is just your number of cycles. Now, H is super important. That's the scaling factor, which is what lets you compare a tiny little atom to a massive galaxy using the exact same math. Then we get to the fun part, the phases. The 3N term is emergence, right when a new structure begins. The 6N squared term is contrast, representing pressure or feedback. And finally, that 9N cubed term is integration, where the system officially settles into its new organized state. Section 3. Mapping 28 domains, testing the pattern across nature. So if a pattern is truly universal, it has to work everywhere, right? The book totally goes for it. It takes this exact mathematical grammar and tests it across 28 radically different fields to see if these threes really do show up across nature. Let's do a quick flyby all of them. Starting from the absolute biggest scale, in cosmology, it maps out cosmic expansion as a 3-6-9 progression. In waves and harmonics, it spots triadic relationships in phases. Field dynamics uses it to model charge, spin, and coupling. Moving to optics, it maps interference and polarization. For sound, acoustics tracks the classic attack, hold, and release. Lattices and crystals looks at triadic unit cell geometry, while thermodynamics maps energetic phase changes right down to the molecular level. Keeping the momentum going, fluid flow analyzes vortex cycles. Chemistry breaks down triphase bonding and reactions. Domain 10 is mathematics itself, testing symmetry and recursion. Information theory looks at how we encode, transmit, and recover data. Computation maps initialization, tuning, and convergence. AI training tracks learning from warm-up to error adjustment to convergence. And network studies the flow between nodes and paths. Now, what happens when we look at living things? Biology maps out cell cycle growth and division. Neuroscience explores predict, sense, and correct feedback loops in the brain. Psychology looks at human attention through arousal, focus, and recovery. Ecology tracks environmental establishment, disturbance, and stabilization. Earth systems maps the load, lock, and release of geology, think earthquakes. Forecasting looks at how we update our beliefs with new evidence, and markets, of course, returns to trend formation, break, and resolution. And finally, the human constructs. Game theory breaks down commit, signal, and enforce strategies. Linguistics maps sound, form, and meaning. Organizations looks at how businesses plan, operate, and adapt. Time and rhythm tests musical beats, bars, and phrases. Urban form scales city blocks, streets, and districts. Dream states map sleep through entry, immersion, and reintegration. And lastly, synthesis, the 28th domain, attempts to bridge energy and information all under one unified architecture. Whew, that is a lot of ground to cover.
Section 4, the testing structure, a shared methodology. Okay, so how on earth does one book actually test all of these wildly different things fairly? The secret is that every single one of those 28 chapters uses a remarkably strict shared methodology to experiment with a theory.
The book treats these chapters as literal working experiments. In every area, it goes through phase mapping, isolates measurable variables, applies those THD equations we looked at, and then compares them straight against real-world data or simulations. But here is the best part. It explicitly documents failure cases. It actively looks for where the pattern breaks down and then generates forward predictions that scientists can test in the future. Section 5. Falsifiability and the bounty, designed to be challenged. This brings us to a massively important point about this framework. THD is presented strictly as a falsifiable, testable hypothesis. It is not being pushed as some dogmatic, accepted scientific law. In fact, Brown is so confident in this scientific standard that he's actually put his money where his mouth is. There is a standing $10,000 falsifiability bounty on the framework. It's literally an open invitation for people to scientifically challenge his work. The book explicitly invites researchers and independent investigators to produce a scientifically valid disproof. It says, plain as day, if THD predicts a relationship and controlled observations fail to show it, the claim has to be revised or thrown out entirely. The framework basically demands to be subjected to actual, rigorous scrutiny. Section 6. Test the pattern yourself. Tools for investigation. So you're probably wondering, how can I get my hands dirty with this? The book actually provides the tools for you to do just that. If you head over to the author's website at creationunified.com, there's a free THD GPT tool waiting for you. You can plug in a data set, maybe stock prices, biological data, whatever you want, and the AI helps you look for plausible 369 structures to generate a testable analysis. But listen to me carefully here. The book makes it perfectly clear that GPT or AI analysis is not proof. It's just a hypothesis generator. Independent, real-world empirical testing is still strictly required. Ultimately, when you strip away the complex equations and step back from those 28 different domains, this explainer leaves us with one profoundly simple yet mind-bending question. Does reality possess a reusable mathematical architecture of transformation? Well, the only way to really know is to check the math yourself. I highly encourage you to go grab the full book, Triune Harmonic Dynamics, on Amazon. Dive into the mathematics, use the tools, and test the framework empirically. Seriously, try to break it. See if this universal pattern survives your own scrutiny. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.